we first began working together, we started a conversation around what things were similar between dance and visual art. How do we get some kind of language started, as a way to communicate to each other what we do and how we can match those things.
So by coming to understand, for example, what line means in drawing and what line means in dance, we're better able to cross over and interrogate what a line actually is and how we can articulate that in a performance environment.
Yeah, so a lot like line for a dancer is completely different to what line is for a drawer, and line is a very internal experience for a mover, and I suppose we were kind of keen to see how we could transcribe line as a starting point. There's a lot of schools, basic schools that contemporary dancers use about moving points through space, so that was a really good way to enter a practice together.
How do you integrate that with what a line is in drawing, which is a line can define space, or it can describe a contour, or it can be directional, or it can be something with texture, something with gesture, something with rhythm. So merging those two things has been one of our core struggles, but also core challenges. And you can apply that same principle to point, to colour, to a shape. All those same terms sit across dance and drawing, but mean very different things.
Yeah, I suppose it's come from a lot of practice together, a lot of improvising together. When we first started working together, we did things quite separately. So I would make up a piece of dance and film it and send it to Todd, because when we began working together, I was living in Perth and Todd was in Sydney. So that changed when I moved back over to Sydney. Rather than it being this to and fro, we got into each other's studio. I think it's the playfulness of it too, actually. Like, because we have such a great personal relationship, it's friendly and it's easy, there's no pretense, there is no weight, there's no gravitas to what we're doing. That might develop into something that has more gravitas, but it might just fizzle, and that's fine too. Like, I think we always enter it with that light-hearted.
It's always a game with rules, and then the opportunity to break the rules.
Yeah. From a body perspective, what really interests me about our collaboration is that I have this opportunity for my body to be left in space rather than it be this thing that disappears. As a dancer, ephemerality is this thing that we always struggle with. You never get to leave something hard for people to see afterwards. It disappears all the time. So to be in a space where someone is supporting you in that way, that they leave marks for you so that people get to see what you've experienced, is really exciting, and like, it can be quite exposing. You know, you look back at a drawing and you go, actually, that was obviously not so good. Like, that was not a great physical experience, and you can see that in the drawing. And I really love that it's a really great opportunity for me to see what I do and to understand what I do from a completely different point of view.
sense of play. During the performance, there'll be moments where I'll think, okay, Carl's headed in that direction, and Carl will change it up. He'll play a trick on you, or he'll shock you, or he'll change. And so as a drawer, I'm constantly on my toes, not just watching. I mean, drawing's about observation, it's about understanding what's going on in front of you. But in this particular parameter, every time you have a bit of an expectation and start to go with that, he'll change it up. Carl will take the lead, and I have to follow, where I'll pull a line out from him, and he's got no choice but to let his body follow and explore that line. So we sort of have to play with the push and pull of our dynamic as well.
because I think a lot of dancers come from dance in a really internal space. It's about the physicality, about how it feels from the inside. By working with Todd over time, I've come to realise that what interests me as a maker of dance is how the body affects the space outside of itself and how you can fill space and reduce space and use perspective. By working with Todd over time, I've become way more aware of what the body looks like from the outside and how it impacts space. So I guess that's been the biggest shift in my dance practice. Egalitarian. I think we've developed a bit of a motto for ourselves that neither thing can exist without the other thing, and we definitely approach the practice in that way. There's no way I would move the way that I do in that space if I didn't have Todd there, and obviously the drawing wouldn't exist in that way either, and so with either one missing, it just doesn't exist.
I can't draw how I do in a flatline performance without being in a flatline performance. Like, there's Todd Fuller drawing and then there's flatline drawing, which are two very different things because of this extra element in the space. The dialects is an old school, low-tech, old version of a live projection unit, and basically what it does is it takes your drawing and projects it live across a surface, and we happen to put a dancer in that surface so the projection takes place across his body as well. It's quite an old piece of technology. We could be using updated versions of that technology, but actually the Elmo unit we have, it has a certain character to it. It's a bit clumsy, it's chunky, it's really analog, and it works with that analog feel we're trying to get by showing actual drawing rather than digital drawing.
I lose track of time quite easily. The performance the other night went super fast. It's very transfixing as an experience to do that, and I think that it's a combination of the tool itself. It makes you much more conscious and aware of how much impact as a performer you have in the ring, in the space. Like, the slightest movement has such a dramatic shift to the drawing and the way that it affects the perspective. It's like there's a density in the room or something, and you're kind of pushing yourself through this dense space. The nuances of their body, the shifts in weight, while you get transfixed on one area, something else, a leg could be going while an arm goes. How do you articulate both those things? So it's constantly making split-second decisions on multiple levels, and so you actually can't listen to anything else that's going on. You've just got to be focused and in that moment and connected to the person in front of you. And so that is quite a entrancing, intense experience to go through. especially those moments of me moving super slow and him moving super fast, because that, as a performer, is exactly what's going on in my body. I think it highlights the actual intensity of moving slowly. Moving slowly is much harder than moving quickly as a performer, and forcing yourself, like I said before, you get into cramps and you've got to do these tiny little shifts to get yourself under the right weight, all this sort of stuff. It's a really intense physical experience.
Got a lot of performance training from Carl through this process, and it's the thing I still struggle to know, or I still find challenging, is knowing when to change speed and when to be actually manipulating speed as a tool. But I mean, drawing is an instant. One of the beautiful things about drawing is its immediacy. It is something that you can make happen like that. See him being aware of the space we're creating and deciding to move, okay, that needs a little bit of energy but not too much, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time there, but then I'm going to come back down here, I'm going to focus here for a little while and build up an energy, build up some texture, okay, and I'm going to move there. Whereas for me, I'm also thinking about duration, which is something you don't really think about in drawing, because duration happens in the act of making, but often the act of making is just about, it's hidden behind the finished product. So having to think about, okay, this line needs to be really slow because I need to allow Carl to be there in that moment, to have those nuances that are really important for him. So we're both integrating and working with the qualities of each other's genres in what I find to be a really exciting way.
You learn through practice and through training that you're really conscious in the process of improvisation that you're choreographing. So sometimes your experience as a performer, that space is very different for an audience member. And to be aware that sometimes when you feel like you've been going for too long, it's not long enough. And sometimes when you feel like you're bored with something, you haven't given it enough time. And being really conscious about looking within yourself, but being aware of what people are seeing and how people are watching. You're in the studio and you'll make a mistake, or you'll get something wrong, or you'll change it. You rub it out, you push, pull, you do whatever you have to get it to that finished product. Here, number one, there isn't necessarily a finished product. It's about that process. It's about all those changes. So sometimes I will get something very wrong in the drawing, and as much as I would like to just scrunch it out, rub it out, push, pull, actually have to work with it. And so I hope that either Carl sees it and can integrate it into his movement, or I just have to declare that was a mistake and mistakes are a part of this process, and I have to be really real about this and not just be focused on the finished, lovely, pretty picture at the end. It's about that whole linear journey, which is what a piece is essentially mapping. I think from a layperson's perspective, performance art can be a bit hard to access, and contemporary dance is even harder. So putting those two things together is a bit crazy. When I talk to people, that's what they want. They want to get it, whether that be a thematic thing or a mood thing or whatever. How does it make them feel? Do they understand why they feel that way? And it's just about providing clear to people, and they can feel how they want to feel about it. But if you give them, I think it just comes quite naturally to me because of my upbringing. I'm from the western suburbs of Sydney. I didn't ever experience around as a kid. I did jazz and funk and hip hop, and that's not what I do now. It's absolutely nothing like what I do now. But all I needed was a door. All I needed was an open door to really appreciate all of this amazing art.
Also, drawing is that entry point. Drawing fundamentally is, in terms of communicating, we as a species often draw before we can talk. So as a hook point or an entry point, it's there. It's an easy door to open.
Yes, well, because we do these site-specific performances, we make film and drawing, we also do performance in black box theatres. Like the rules at play in those spaces are, I think, pretty well known. And
I'm very aware of how different audiences respond to our work in different environments and play to those things sometimes. A gallery, of course, the audience is inclined, they're there to watch, they're there generally for you or for something like you. So they're more inclined to sit and stay and watch the whole piece, experience the whole journey, so you can slow it down, tease it out. Sometimes there will be a structure, so not necessarily a script, but we will know that roughly for 4 minutes we're going to be working these set of rules, and then there will be some sort of trigger which allows the next set of rules to come into play. And so that type of underlying structure often does exist, which gives us something to work with. I think also we've come at this sort of saying, well, let's just try it. Every time we have a new idea, it's like, well, let's just try it. Let's see how it works in that environment. And we keep sort of saying, did it work? We haven't really had any experiments where we've walked away from it going, actually that didn't work. All of them have been like, okay, that actually worked in that context, and then it worked in that context because there was that shift, and then it moved to that context, and again there was that little shift, but that worked. And then, so we have new projects on the horizon, and again we'll be going, okay, how does this work in that environment, in that environment, in that environment? Each of those seed pods now will go on to be their own.
yeah,
So we've essentially got 6 new works or 6 new experiments there that are each going to take on a life of their own. And each of those, again, will get tested in a cross-section of environments to see how it works, see what the audience takes, how it works. Do they engage, do they not?